All right, applicants, thanks so much for joining us in this special DO add-on session to our PEDS Match 21 webinar series. My name is Nick. I am a fourth year at the Indiana University School of Medicine, and I'm one part of the Twitter account at Future PEDSRES. We're really glad to have you tonight.
And my name is Makelai Neelakantan. I'm also a fourth year medical student at WMed in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I'm another part of at Future PEDSRES, and like Nick said, so happy to be here with all of you tonight. I just wanted to mention another Future PEDSRES member, Reef Dia, who isn't here today because she's having something really exciting going on this evening, but we did want to shout her out because she's done a lot of work as the leader of the Future PEDSRES DO Equity Initiative. So we wanted to thank her for everything that she's done.
Wonderful. So tonight we have several different panelists representing different groups. One of them that has sponsored the series is the APPD. So we wanted to mention these few names. So Dr. Blankenberg, she's the president of APPD. She couldn't make the call tonight, but did want to welcome everybody. And then we also have Dr. John Frona and Dr. Chris Rooney, who are on the call. Dr. Frona, you want to say hi?
Sure. I just want to add my welcome to everybody, and we're really excited that you're here. The DOs are an important part of the pediatric world for us. Significant number of our applicants nationwide are DO trained, and over the years we've really been looking for ways to continue to enhance the opportunities for DO residents to join our programs, to make our programs more accessible. And so we're really excited to be able to present this webinar tonight to try to provide some insight into how programs think about opportunities for osteopathic trained residents.
Absolutely, and I'm Chris Rooney. I am the Vice Chair of Education and the Program Director at Lehigh Valley Riley Children's Hospital, Lehigh Valley Health Network, and very excited that we could put this together, and really appreciate all of the help that Nick and Makelai and everyone really that's contributed to these webinars has provided. I think it's been an awesome resource, and looking forward to getting the session going.
All right, so as always, we wanted to quickly mention our Future PEDSRES FPR webinar series goals, essentially providing PEDS residency applicants with a chance to connect with programs during this crazy virtual season.
Awesome. Okay, so our schedule for tonight is very brief. So welcome and intros, which we're doing now. We'll quickly transition to 4 of the most frequently asked questions as they relate to the DOs and the interview season. And then our last section, in which will make up the last half of the hour, is live Q&A. So at any time, including now, you can begin using the Q&A box at the bottom and sending in your questions, and Makelai and I will continue to collate them as we approach the Q&A portion. There are 2 ways in which you can engage. I just talked about one of them, but if you are on Twitter, you're welcome to ask us the questions on Twitter, and we'll pull them for the Q&A session. So all you have to do, include in the tweet hashtag FPR webinar, which is in the bottom left of your screen now, and then we'll be able to pull those from Twitter as well.
Perfect. So now I'd like to introduce our panelists. So I'll just call out your name if you want to tell us what your favorite Halloween costume is, or what you're planning on doing this weekend. So first up is Dr. Alex Rakowski.
So I'm Alex Rakowski. I'm the APD at Nationwide Children's Hospital and help run the osteopathic recognition track. So my favorite Halloween costume was an armpit. So when I went to Hershey for medical school, my roommate and I grew these big bushy beards. We got these sort of old white sheets, made like a t-shirt out of it, so it looks like we're armpits, and we put antiperspirant on our face, and nobody had any idea what we were. So I think the best part was trying to explain it to a bunch of people at a medical school party that were armpits. So
And next we have Dr. Oriaku Kas-Osoka, and I don't see her on the call yet, but of course we'd want to mention she's one of our wonderful panelists as well. She's a program director. She's a program director at UNLV. So when she hops on, we can have her say a couple of words. So next I'll move on to Dr. Maria Raimundo.
Hi, I'm Maria, and my favorite costume was when I was Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. But the sad thing was, this happened about 3 years ago, and none of our patients and our parents knew The Wizard of Oz anymore.
Downtown.
So this year we're planning on going as Star Wars characters, and I'm told that I'm going to be Princess Leia.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I still have to find my costume.
Wonderful. Next, we have Dr. Ross Newman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ross Newman. I'm the program director at Children's Mercy in Kansas City. I'm a Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine grad, now called A.T. Still University, which ages me a little bit. I'm excited to be on the panel and hopefully give you guys some good advice and direction. I know I meet with a lot of osteopathic students that rotate through our institution, and I'm always a little bit disappointed in some of the advice that the osteopathic students get compared to the allopathic students that come through. And so hopefully we can give you guys some good direction today. I'm going to go sappy with the Halloween costume icebreaker because I have an 11-year-old, I have a 6-year-old, and I have a almost 1-year-old at home. And my wife's Halloween costume when she was 1 is some sort of leopard animal kind of thing. And they've all worn that for their first Halloween. So we're bringing out of the basement so my almost 1-year-old can wear it as well. So
Very nice.
it's not an armpit, but has some sentimental value.
You can always borrow the armpit if you want, Ross. So,
And last but not least, we have Dr. Jennifer Wolford.
Hi, thanks for inviting me to be on the panel. I am an associate program director at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, or UPMC, as you're clicking your ERAS applications. I am a 2006 graduate of Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. One of my classmates has been in the national spotlight in the past week treating a famous patient. So my thoughts are with him because I'm sure it's a high pressure situation. A little bit about my training. I did do the osteopathic rotating internship in Philadelphia for my first year, and then I came to my categorical peds residency at Children's in Pittsburgh. So I have gone through many of these steps and some that you may be considering. I'm happy to share with you from the program director side as well as my shared experiences in training. I was terrible at Halloween costumes, but I have a toddler who was born with a shock of black hair, Caroline, but we did dress her up as Elvis for her first Halloween, which was 2 Halloweens ago. It was a huge hit. And so that was the most creative thing I've ever done for Halloween. It wasn't even my costume.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Wow, you guys really show up for Halloween, this panel right here. Awesome. All right. It is time. Let's transition to our 4 questions. I will introduce the question and then turn it over to Dr. Rooney. So the first question is, how are the COMLEX Level 1 scores viewed since the recent merger of residencies? And is it also being considered as pass-fail?
Great, so thank you. So I do want to point out that the responses that I'm going to be relaying to all of our participants actually come directly from the AACOM's Council on Residency Placement, and Allegneda Long has been incredible about sort of pulling together these answers on somewhat short notice. And I think it's important to make sure I give credit where credit is due. So that's really the background of where these answers are coming from. For the first question, in terms of how are complex level 1 scores viewed since the merger, that really is going to be sort of program specific and on a program to program basis. So I'm gonna defer to the part where I ask my partners in panelist crime here to give their opinions. But in terms of, is it also considered pass-fail? So the whole pass-fail exclusive situation does not actually begin until the 2024 class. And NBOME is actually gathering a lot of data from the community right now to talk about whether COMLEX should go pass-fail as well. But there's no decisions that have been officially made yet. I know that there's been a recent program director survey that showed that programs are sort of split down the middle in terms of how many think pass only makes sense versus a certain target score making sense. So stay tuned on that, but no decisions made and not something that would directly impact this particular interview season. So with that in mind, I guess I'll just start from the top box on my screen, and that happens to be you, Ross. So do you want to take a stab at this one?
Yeah, after I unmute, right? The problem with virtual meetings, you have to unmute. I'll jump in. I will say that the merger is something that got a lot of attention, but I'm the program director for an allopathic program. And the merger itself between DO and MD programs made no impact for us. And so the questions about pre or post merger, and really there's no difference from our standpoint. We look at the osteopathic applications and the applicants the same. There's some questions later that's going to get into the nuts and bolts of what your COMLEX score should be and how many programs you should apply to. But for right now, for me, the scores are viewed the same pre-merger versus post-merger.
Great, thank you. Did Alex want to address it for your program?
Yeah, sure. I think we're one of the programs in the half that don't really agree with this decision because, it's just data and with so many new medical schools out there and so many new campuses out there, it's another piece of data that you can use. We interview a lot of osteopaths. We get about 350 a year that apply. So it's a really important piece of data because a lot of my colleagues have not either heard of the medical school or it's a brand new medical school. So having some hard data that you can come out and say, I got a high COMLEX score, I think helps you. I think down the road and it potentially becomes pass-fail, I think it disproportionately hurts the osteopaths because, if you're a pass-fail from a well-recognized school, I'll pick on IU here, compared to somebody from, let's say, Marion from the same city, people are going to know IU a whole lot better than Marion. So I'm kind of hoping that there's this data point at least available for the osteopaths to kind of sense the program.
Thanks. Jennifer? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I agree with both what has previously been said. I will say that one of the things that might be helpful to the applicants is that now we do not require, to be honest, our DO applicants were required to also take a USMLE, and with that going pass-fail, we now don't have to require it, which was nothing more than a financial barrier that I think was restrictive. And so I'm, was very glad to finally push that off. And so that's the one positive thing, and it's good for you as an applicant to be reading, to looking what the requirements are, because there are some programs that still might be requiring the USMLE. So I'm glad with sort of mergers and that we're moving away from that. And where we end up with the scores, agree that there are just other schools that are known better. So on some level, we'll have to see where it shakes out. We'll obviously adapt with what MBone decides.
Great. Maria, did you want to add anything before we move to the next question?
I would just say that we are also pass-fail, and we either take COMLEX or USMLE.
Perfect, thank you. And from my program's perspective, yeah, we do not require any USMLE scores from our osteopathic applicants as long as COMLEX has been taken. So perfect. All right, I think we can move on to the next question.
So for question 2, is there a recommended number of programs to apply to if a student only took COMLEX?
All right, so this is a big question that comes up pretty frequently. So the AACOM committee's answer really is not necessarily. So I know that's not, really carving it out very clearly to you, but it really does come down to students applying to the right programs, and I would wholeheartedly support that answer. So the response from the committee was that students can identify programs that have equal acceptance of COMLEX based on residency program search sites and data. They did give some nice data about a recent program director survey, which made me sort of proud of the pediatric community, because in pediatrics, it essentially resulted that program directors essentially weigh USMLE and COMLEX Step 1 scores relatively similarly. USMLE Step 1 was 92%, called it an important factor, but COMLEX was 87% an important factor. And that's very different from a lot of other specialties where actually COMLEX was weighted only 56% of an important factor as opposed to pediatrics where it's really viewed very similarly to USMLE. So I think you can feel pretty confident about it if you've only taken COMLEX, as long as you've done your homework and the program does not require the USMLE score. I will take it in reverse order this time and give Maria first dibs at any additional thoughts you have on that.
So I will say that we agree. Because we don't know what the comparison is, we are really looking for a pass score for both of them. I think that if you're an osteopathic student, look and see, how many osteopathic students are on the roster of the school. Also look at the faculty. Do they, have DO faculty and core faculty on their roster? That tells you if you're considered an equivalent person. In my program, I don't know the difference between DOs and MDs. When I meet somebody, I don't say, oh, you're an MD or a DO. I think that if you're a DO student, you want to go somewhere where they look at you as a unique individual and they don't look at the suffixes behind your name.
Okay, and then anyone else have, not just specific to your program, but just general advice regarding this, this particular question? Alex.
Yeah, so I think the question almost adds, it seems to be asking if you take COMLEX, COMLEX only, you're going to be penalized. And I think like Jennifer mentioned, there were some programs and very few that are still asking for USMLE, but I wouldn't consider COMLEX like you have to do more just because you only took the COMLEX. Like Maria mentioned, it's the whole package. So you should talk to your advisor. What does your package look like, with COMLEX being one data point? So it isn't like you have to add more data points or add to different programs just because you only took COMLEX. I mean, the vast majority of people that apply to, I'm going to say to most programs in pediatrics or DOs, just took COMLEX.
Great. All right. Next question.
All right, wonderful. Question 3. Are there recommendations for numbers of programs to apply to based on COMLEX Step 1 scores?
Perfect. Yeah. So, and I know that this question, I think, did come to be a little bit more popular given there were some recommendation statements out there that did pin a certain recommended number of programs to a certain USMLE score range, but did not provide that same information for a certain COMLEX score range. So to some extent, that's because the data is not as readily available as with the USMLE. But we did get an answer from our friends at AACOM, and they basically said, keep in mind, application number depends on more than just scores, which I would wholeheartedly agree with. Always remembering program preferences, geographical preferences, reachable, safety, DO placement percentages, etc. But they did say, if you're looking at an average, and this is not written in stone, and we definitely recommend sitting down with a trusted advisor as sort of the be all end all, recommendation here. But on an average, it does say that the number of applications for students who applied for PEDS in the 2020 match was about 30, so consistent with a 3-to-1 application to interview ratio. And that's presuming you have a pretty average COMLEX score and no major, blemishes on your application. But again, that's not a strict recommendation. That's, just some advice that we got from this council, and we wouldn't want to guide anyone one way or another just based on one council's response to the question. So please do still sit down with an advisor or whoever is your resource at your institution before you decide on your final number of program applications. Any other thoughts on that question broadly from our panelists?
So this is Maria. If you look at the APPD and all the other organizations, really, they talk about if you are in good standing, which means you don't repeat a year, you didn't fail a step, you really don't have to apply for more than 15 or 16 programs in pediatrics. Again, remember that, we are pretty nice. We're looking for people who really are professional team players. And it's not always, are you the world greatest researcher? It is, are you really passionate about taking care of children? And I think you have to remember that. And so you're probably doing yourself a disservice when you do 30 different interviews, because no one can be that hyped up for 30 different interviews. So if you're in good standing, 15 or 16 is fine. And then if you do have a problem, you failed a year or you failed a step, I agree with you. Go to your medical school counselor. They know how to advise you. They've advised probably tens to hundreds of people in your area, and they can help you with the best advice, and take their advice. Don't take program directors or your faculty.
If I can,
Yeah.
oh, sorry. So,
Go ahead, Alex.
Let's go with
okay,
Jennifer and then
I jumped
Alex.
out. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
No worries.
I think the points we're all taking. I would also suggest that, so where my school was, and then I was able to do, and in other years you can do away rotations, which I think across most of the country is suspended. And I do think you're facing a challenge in that this year. But it doesn't mean it's not overcomable. But I would, not just your med school, and you've probably got great mentors, but you may need to reach out to a pediatrician at programs like the ones you want to get into or be at, so that, and find someone, just because my med school's Department of Pediatrics wasn't as strong as St. Christopher's in Philadelphia, and I was able to make a connection there, and that's where I found some pediatric mentors. So I do think there's some challenges for DO students getting the mentorship they want, because you're not typically you're not housed in the major universities, and some are. I don't know the layout of every school's, what your PEDS rotations look like. So I do want to say, not just, even if you have to go back to like your mom's friends at work, their sister-in-law is an academic pediatrician. I want you to be able to get the mentorship of someone that, if you have to get beyond your med school, I need you to make that connection. And if you all need to email me, that's cool. But I do think that sometimes in our med schools, that's not as readily available. So make sure you're seeking out the mentorship of academic pediatricians to help advise on some of this. And then on the numbers, I agree. It's easy to click boxes on ERS. It's hard. It's certainly hard to travel to 25 interviews. I agree. You also need a high amount of energy on a Zoom interview day as well. But so you can sort of go down from there. But just make sure you're getting mentorship, even in the right areas, from the people that can speak on the ground to it. And
Great. Thank you. Alex?
I just want to kind of clarify also that it isn't the number of programs you need, but also it's the match. And I think everybody's kind of alluded to this as well. I mean, think about what your passion really is, and then try to find the programs that kind of match that passion, and then decide if that's the program I really wanted to apply to. If you want a larger Midwestern program, there's like 30 of us. If you want a smaller rural program, there's just a few out there, but they're very good. If you want a more inner city experience, there's some really good programs for that. So try to figure out where am I most comfortable, where do I want to go, and then figure out the programs in that area. And it's okay to reach out to the PDs and APDs. Like we helped, just personally, we helped the OU, the Ohio University College of Osteopathic Medicine students. We just sit down and just kind of go over, not so much individually, but here's just a list of programs in the area that you may not even have heard of. And sometimes it's just shocking, like, oh, I didn't even hear about. Mercy comes up a lot because we have Ross here, for example. Is a really good program that, people don't consider, like, oh, wow, it's not that far away from us. And just look around, what are you comfortable with, where you want to go, and then don't get as hung up on the numbers, really focus in more on what you want to do and where you're comfortable.
Great. If I can jump in, I'm going to agree with Jennifer on the mentorship. And Maria, made the comment, if you have a great mentor, that's your best resource. That's somebody that knows the landscape, hopefully somebody within an academic residency program that you've either rotated at or or could reach out to. My worry with a lot of the DO students, especially with a lot of the newer schools, that they don't have those relationships. There's a graduate from my program who is a community pediatrician in the South, and she's the chair of pediatrics at one of the newer DO schools. She runs a full-time private practice, and that's their pediatric division. And so she's great, but she's not going to know the landscape of number of programs to apply to. And so when you're getting into that granular detail, you're going to need somebody who can advise you the best you can. If you can't find anybody, those national standards are great to go by. What I tell people is that we do a holistic review of everyone's application, and COMLEX scores are just a part of that. Everyone does a holistic review. What that means then is different at every single program and how they break that down. The way ours comes out is COMLEX Step 1 scores about 5% of your overall grade and score. Then Step 2 is another 5%. So boards comes about 10% of your our process. Everyone's going to have a different weight as they go through that. And so keep in mind that those other things on your application, are you top of your class or bottom of your class? Which quartile do you fall in? Have you done any extracurricular activities? All of those are going to weigh in addition to your COMLEX score. So you have to think of the totality of your application and kind of that holistic review. The only curveball I would throw at you, if you are from one of those newer DO schools, those are hard to interpret on the MSPE and on your application side. I have a hard time reviewing a dean's letter or an MSPE from one of the newer DO schools compared to an allopathic school. To give it to you guys straight, the allopathic schools packet is significantly better. I get more comparable data. I get more robust clerkship comments and even scores and shelf exams sometimes. And in some of the osteopathic rotations, I get psychiatry, good job. I get internal medicine, was a good team player. And so it's really hard to figure out how that compares with the other applicants applying to our programs. And with the bigger problem of people applying to so many programs, it's really hard not to let that weed out. So I would factor that in as well. I don't want you to apply to more programs than you need to, because you can't do it. You can't interview, even with going virtual this year, but you need to factor all those things in to find the right number that's going to make you successfully match.
I would also add to something that you said, and it's letters of recommendation. What I've noticed is a lot of DO students get community, like primary care physicians, and they write like one little paragraph. And I know that that's really common, so I understand it. But when you compare yourself to allopathic, some of these allopathic students are getting letters from academic medical centers that are like 5 to 6 paragraphs in length. So if you can, try to get somebody from an academic medical center who really does know how to write you a good letter of recommendation. I don't know if anyone else has had that experience.
So for the sake
Maria,
of time, we need to move on to question 4 so that we give our panel or our participants enough time for the live Q&A. So why don't we get to question 4, because actually I think you'll be able to jump in with maybe a little bit more advice at that point.
Excellent. So question 4 is, in general, best advice you can give to an osteopathic student applying to pediatric residency this year.
Right. So I will start and just stress the importance of sort of doing your homework. And I think that was sort of in the background of all of our panelists' responses thus far, is really sort of knowing what you want, where you want to be, and then taking the time to do the research to say, what is this program's percentage of osteopathic residents that are matched into their program versus allopathic, because that probably does make a difference in terms of likelihood of matching future osteopathic residents to some degree. The AACOM's best advice I would wholeheartedly agree with as well, which is this is all going to be okay, guys. Osteopathic students do not have significant obstacles matching into pediatrics, even if COMLEX is the only standardized test that you've taken. And it's, they really echoed what I just said. It's important to look at the program's DO placement percentage. So just taking a look and making sure you kind of have a track record for the programs you're applying to. They actually, and we are not necessarily advocating this resource, but it was one that they passed along, and you all may be totally aware of it already, but they were saying that residencyexplorer.org is a nice resource to utilize in terms of trying to do the homework on a bunch of programs. So I will give each of our panelists a little bit of time to give you or give their best advice, and then we can move on to the live Q&A session. So let's start with Jennifer for this one.
Sure, there's a lot. So I think that just a little glimpse behind the scenes. So your dean's letter matters, which is your total package from your med school. So, you know, don't haphazardly pass off the rotation evaluation to a person. Like, make sure they fill it out and make sure it gets turned in, because that does bulk up your dean's letter, right? Again, I think there's some community rotations where this isn't the follow through, where at major allopathic centers, the faculty get continuous emails until that evaluation is filled in. And so again, I do think you have to fight harder sometimes for those things, but that matters. And then your scholarly activity matters. So if you've been messing around with a poster presentation or abstract, get it submitted so that you can add on to that it is in press or it's been accepted or whatever, right? And so your research activity matters. So these things, once that you put them into the ERAS, they matter. So scholarly activity matters. Agree that the letters of recommendation, you want a strong letter writer. So when I ask for a letter writer, so you want to hand them your CV, you want to hand them a stamped envelope, you want to hand them a copy of your personal statement, you want to be willing to sit down with them and tell them why you want to be a pediatrician, because they're going to write a better letter for you, right? And so you do everything you can for that letter writer to make it easier for them. Additionally, community activities matter, and your personal statement, hand it to the toughest 5 critics you know and let them gut it, right? Because a good personal statement, you know, generally is a nice thing, but a bad personal statement or a weak one can just sink you. And I don't want you to stress about it, right? It's not that huge part of the application, but it is an opportunity. I mean, I want you to be able to recite it in your sleep because you've gone over it that much, especially because you're not getting those away rotations this year, given our, you know, public health crisis. So everything counts. It's not just a score, but I agree. I do concur that DO students, you've got to go above and beyond on your details to maximize your presentation. I hope that's helpful and not scary.
Great. All right, let's jump to Ross.
I agree with Jennifer. I went long-winded last time, so I'll keep this a little bit short. My advice is that it's similar to applying to college, that you have to be thoughtful about where you're applying to and be realistic about where you're applying to, and then have your balance of what your CV and what your ERAS application can do. If you only apply to Harvard and Stanford for college, you're kind of playing with fire that you're not going to get in. And so you have to be able to figure out what program is the right program for you for whatever reason. You can have some programs that maybe are reach based on your file. You can have some programs that are going to be maybe the spot where you're going to fit in well and thrive. And think about being thoughtful as you go through the process. I had a student from a newer DO school that told me last year they were advised to apply to 60 programs. And I asked them why 60, because their school told everyone in P's to go apply for 60. So that's not being thoughtful, right? That's just a blanket number that the school's not giving very good advice. So think through your application and find that balance of where you're applying.
Excellent, thank you. Alex.
I just want to kind of echo what Jennifer said before. So this is going to be a weird year without the sub-Is or the sort of visiting rotations that a lot of these a lot of the children's hospitals. So really build yourself up in the personal letter. It's your opportunity to essentially show your passion and show us who you are. And that will stand out. In other words, we all do holistic reviews of everybody's applications, not just COMLEX scores. It's not even just the grades. It really is like a whole combination. But if you're passionate about health literacy, you're passionate about, reach out and read, and you've done a lot of activities with it, take the time to mention in your letter, take the time to kind of mention in the ERAS application, a little more details about what you did instead of just saying reach out and read committee. I was the president, I went to schools, I presented. Give us some details, because that's what's going to attract people to kind of look at that application and say, oh, this is somebody who's passionate about a certain topic, and let us know. And I agree, do your homework as far as like where you want to go and what the programs are out there.
Excellent, thank you. Maria?
So I will say the odds are ever in your favor. And what I mean by that is, you will match as long as you're realistic, as long as you know your strengths and weaknesses and go and look at realistic programs. The odds are that you will match. The match is in your favor. Be yourselves, be unique. Remember that you will probably succeed in whatever pediatric program you go to, because we're all friendly, we're all family, we all have residents and faculty that want to help you succeed. So maybe you don't get in your first program or your second choice, but I will tell you that for the most part, you'll get excellent training wherever you go, and you will find a peer group and faculty that are supportive. So I know it's really stressful, but I want to tell you that it's all going to end up okay. And I think that's something you have to know.
Excellent. All right. Nick and Mikola, do you think we should move on to our next portion?
It is time. Let's do it. Live Q&A. Okay, everybody. So we have questions both on Twitter and on the Zoom Q&A. I'm going to open with the very first question. It comes from Twitter, from the account entitled Your Kids Save Future Pediatrician. And the question is, I had it pulled up. Okay, the question is, we hear a lot about COMLEX 1. However, do programs consider COMLEX 2 if someone doesn't do as well compared to level 1? Would anyone like to begin with this?
I will. I think that we look more for doing better. So if you have a marginal COMLEX score, but you do better on COMLEX 2, that is considered a positive. I am more worried about the person that has an okay COMLEX 1 score and then barely passes COMLEX 2.
And I'll just hop in real quickly to say, sure, of course, again, please know that I don't know a program director across the country that is not looking at applications truly and fully holistically. So please remember that. And I think the conversation steered a lot towards COMLEX 1 tonight, because that's actually a lot of the questions that were requested by participants. And I think some of that stems from, there's articles out there that say, what's the predictive capability of a USMLE Step 1 score to how someone's going to do on their ABP certifying exam, right? And then everybody tries to extrapolate that and say, okay, well, that's Step 1 USMLE. And does that mean that then COMLEX can sort of be extrapolated from that? And maybe Step 1 is more predictive than Step 2. In the end, I completely agree with Maria. If you didn't do amazingly well on Step 1, I certainly would like to see that you did better on Step 2. Like, I'm not gonna, completely micromanage, the scores to the nitty gritty detail. So I think keep that in mind, but that's where I think a lot of that Step 1 conversation stems from. And then I did want to just throw out there, because Nick had mentioned in our chat, and we had talked about this in another webinar, but there is that NBOME score converter tool that lives on the NBOME website. So if you guys are still interested in sort of trying to figure out in some way, shape, or form how your COMLEX Step 1 score compares to a USMLE Step 1 score, that's the closest thing you're going to find that's out there in a sort of reliable website, but it is not apples to apples. What it gives you is sort of a percentage comparison, but it does not convert the raw score. But I just wanted to make sure you guys knew that that existed. It's at least some type of a helpful tool for you.
If I can jump in real quick and just say a decreasing step 2 was the question, right? A step 2 score that's lower than step 1. That doesn't matter if it's complex or USMLE. If your step 2 score went down, that's going to be a concern. That's going to be something on your file that you're going to have to address. And that's going to be your reason why you may need to broaden your network a little bit for the number of programs you apply to.
All right.
All right.
You have more questions?
Yes, we definitely do. So next one is from an anonymous attendee. I understand this is a very subjective question, and I appreciate any honesty available. When it comes to ranking students, just based on our suffix, will an interviewed DO student have an equal opportunity to their MD colleague?
I can take that one. I'm going to have to say it's going to be program dependent, but for the programs who are comfortable with osteopathic, Maria mentioned, you have no idea and you don't really care if it's an MD or a DO, future graduate sitting in front of you. We interview probably 30% osteopaths and 70% MDs every year, and I honestly ask people not to even look at the files. I mean, we know, when you look at the files, when you're interviewing a whole series of residency applicants, to see who it is and who it isn't. So programs who are comfortable with DOs, who've taken DOs historically, you're at no disadvantage. If you come from a brand new med school, like Ross had mentioned, even us, the programs that do take a lot of DOs, we don't know you. So there'll be a lot of questions about, tell us about your school and your experiences, but that doesn't disadvantage you. It just may mean more probing about what your background is.
I think those are great points. I want to say it's part of the whole package, and being successful in medical school, regardless of where you are, will add to that entire composite. I do just want to send the message that, you'll match into a program, and I was the only one in my class as a DO. They didn't make a special schedule for me. If I was assigned to the NICU to start, it doesn't matter. Once you match, you are one of the intern class, and you are fully there, and you belong there. And where you match is, you belong there. And so nobody rearranges a schedule because of who can handle it, and nobody even knows when you're signing your multiple notes and when you're pre-rounding what the initials are after your name. And so it's part of a whole package, being successful and working hard. I will just comment from our program, I've watched in the past 5 years, we continue to wait more and more on the interview. So you show up and you're a good interviewer and you present your best self. It's amazing how we're seeing that push into stealing points from other parts of our composite score as we figure out our rank list. So yes, you belong there. Yes, you have just as much chance. And once you show up on match day, that's it. You're one of 20, you're one of 10, you're one of 30, and you're expected to do all the work that anybody else is.
And I'm the token MD on this probably panel, and I agree. We do not distinguish. So I think that as a DO student, if you look in somebody's website and you find out that there is only MDs, you're probably not going to have a big chance, especially if the faculty, they're all MDs. Look around, you'll get a good idea of where you fit in or not. But again, most programs I think are changing, and they're seeing that, it's what you bring to the table and who you are as a person. Again, we don't have different tracks. Everyone is expected, like you said, to work equally hard. We do not do rotations by whether you have an MD or DO degree.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so our next question comes from Sijal Patel. Thank you. And it is, how are programs approaching the current situation with the COMLEX Level 2 PE being delayed and the possibility of many applicants not having a PE score by the time ranking lists are submitted?
I can start off with that one also. Honestly, I don't think it makes a big difference. We're going to work with the data that we get, and there are so many people who are missing data as it is. honestly, the way COVID looked a couple months ago, we were thinking we won't get any step 2 scores or COMLEX scores. So what you give us is what you get. We're not going to hold it against you.
If I can piggyback on that, there's a national recommendation from APPD and COMCEP and other organizations that have stated, what all programs should be doing. And one of the things is that we're going to take the data that you have available to us when you apply and when you interview, which is going to be different than what we've done in the past. And we're going to know you may not have a sub-I that you previously we would have wanted, or you may not have that score that we would want to have comparable data with your peers. And so we're all going to roll with it, and it should not add any more stress to any students that they haven't had those opportunities because of the pandemic. And again, back to Maria's point, we're pediatricians, we're pretty reasonable people across the board, and we're not going to hold you negative for something that was out of your control.
Took the words out of my mouth, Ross. Yeah, I think I've been on enough national calls, and I'm on the APPD Recruitment Action Committee, and it is absolutely the recommendation for every program across the country to be understanding about those things. So that's one less thing you need to stress about.
Wonderful. So our next question comes from Rebecca, and she says, I've spoken to program directors this season that have said because there's a risk of students over applying, there may be a tendency to prioritize students that have rotated at that hospital or are attending schools affiliated with that hospital. If there are programs you're really interested in, but we're unable to rotate through, what other suggestions do you all have for expressing interest in setting yourself apart?
So I'll start with that one. And this is a conversation that we've had at the national level in terms of like, where's the fine line between, there's certainly some appropriate discouragement of like too much outside of the process communication and love letters and, the whole 9 yards. However, it seems like most people are in agreement that given the sort of unique circumstances of this year, if a program is literally your dream program, and you certainly would have done a rotation there, had you could have, it is not completely out of the range of normal, and probably recommended to reach out just with a very professional, email to just sort of express your interest and, maybe provide a little bit of insight about why that program meant so much to you. From the program director side of things, I can tell you that's enormously helpful, because one of the things I'm most freaked out about is that I'm going to have to try to holistically review 30 times the number of applications that I normally would have. And so anything that can sort of let me know about a genuine interest is probably going to be pretty welcome. I'll defer to the other panelists to see if they agree.
And you can always reach out to the residency coordinator. So not so much the program coordinator, but the recruitment coordinator. So a lot of programs have somebody just dedicated to that, or at least for a few months have them dedicated to that. And there's something that you really makes a big difference. So again, I'll use Ross from Kansas City. If your family's from Kansas City, or you grew up in Kansas City, and when you want to come back and you went to, Toro Valleja, and you're like, why does California want to come to my program? Explain it. We do this in non-COVID years as well, because we don't know why people are applying to us. And if there's a good reason, we will take you more seriously, because we're pediatricians and we're big teddy bears to begin with. So we'll try to make you happy.
I was going to completely agree from the standpoint of it's going to be hard as a program director not to look at my more local schools and my more schools that we traditionally get people from, when we've had very few people rotate through our institution on sub-Is or elective rotations from those maybe different schools. And if you reach out to me and you're actually interested in my program, that helps a ton. The Future Peds Res is organized by region because people tend to stay in their region. And so if you're not from the region and you're still interested, you're going to be on the lower end of my list, because I'm not sure you're really going to move to Kansas City and really rank me highly. But if you reach out for whatever reason, I'm interested in the program for this, or I got family or whatever, that makes a huge difference. Helps a lot.
I think you can reach out to PDs, coordinators. You might consider chief residents, and then I would look at your senior residents, see if there's any alumni from your school. That might be a good new connection to make, and they might be able to put in a good word, because again, this is an unusual time.
Awesome. Thanks so much for all that input. I think we'll have one or two questions left, but let's start with the next one. And this comes from an anonymous attendee. What are your suggestions regarding personalizing personal statements for programs to help us stand out as a DO student?
We get this every year. It's like the same personal statement, and at the end it talks about Children's Mercy in Kansas City and so on, as like the last paragraph. It doesn't change your ability to get an interview or your rank or anything along those lines from my perspective. It's fine. It's not a negative, but it doesn't help.
I'm going to take it a step further, Ross. So if you actually just personalize one or two and give a reason why in the bottom of the letter, I think that's very helpful. But if it's sort of like a cheesy, slick statement that I've always wanted to live in Columbus, Ohio, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, whoever, Akron, Allentown, and it looks like it's a slick statement, it's probably going to hurt you. So if you're going to personalize it, make sure it's personalized and keep it to just a few programs that you really want to personalize for.
I agree.
Okay, Mekla, I think we have one more then.
All right, so our last question is, what advice would you offer a DO student who is couples matching with an MD student and the DO student has only COMLEX for board scores? Not sure what is a safe number of programs to apply to. Thank you so much.
I can take first stab. It used to be so much harder when the osteopathic match was a month earlier than the allopathic match. And we actually attempted, because we have on average around 25% of our program is osteopathic. So we had a few of those couples matches, and it was quite the juggling act. So it's a lot easier having a single match now. I will talk to your advisor, and it doesn't matter if it's COMLEX only or if whatever you have. It depends on how strong of a applicant you are, and then base your numbers of applications based on that. My daughter and her husband just did couples matching into two fairly competitive specialties, and they went to Cincinnati for medical school, and they sat down with their advisor and basically spent like an hour and a half just kind of figuring out, plotting out how we're going to do this. And I mean, that's the best way to do it. There's no magic number. It really depends on who you are and where you want to go and how far away are you willing to live from each other.
And I agree. It also depends on what you're matching in too. I mean, pediatrics is not bad, but if you're going for orthopedic surgery, maybe a different story, or dermatology. And then it depends also on your criteria as a candidate if you're going into dermatology.
I would just add that, again, this is where the homework on the programs comes into play, really significantly. So, I'm an MD, we're, at an ACGME accredited program, but over half my residents each year tend to be osteopathic residents. You can feel pretty good about applying to a program with those types of numbers in a couples matching format, because you're probably going to be going into an environment where they do sort of have that blinding, it doesn't really matter to me if it says DO or MD after someone's name. That may not be the case at some other programs, and therefore you might need to cast a little bit broader net if your person you're couples matching with is only, kind of narrowing in on those types of programs that have never matched a DO into their program in the last 10 years, right? So I think that's where the homework on the programs really comes into play and is very helpful.
I was going to add, I survived a couples match. My wife and I met in medical school. She's an adult infectious disease doctor. Where we both went through the allopathic match as opposed to the osteopathic match back when they were separated. If you're going through the couples match, it'll work. You'll match. This question is so hard to answer from the perspective of it depends what your couples matching with. In Kansas City, there's 3 family medicine programs and 1 pediatric. And so that changes kind of the process if you're looking for, those 2 fields versus if you want to do plastic surgery in pediatrics. It's back to all the conversations we've already had about how competitive your application is overall.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for all the answers. Well, guys, I think that concludes our session tonight. Really, really thankful for all of the background work that our panelists and even panelists that weren't on the call tonight helped us with. couldn't have done it without them, as well as the support from APPD and COMCEPT. To our DO applicants, it sounds, from my perspective, the theme of the night is take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. We're all in this together. It's going to work out. So you can continue to reach out to us on Twitter and Instagram. We can also field your questions and get them to the right people if you continue to have a question. But we thank so much for your attending this event this evening, and we wish you the best of luck in the upcoming season. Have a great night.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you all.